Hello, one and all, and welcome to Office Hours. Every single day we gather here to answer your media and tech-related production questions. Today, our first question is going to be read courtesy of Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Alexander, what have we got to dive into?
First question is coming from Alec Peterson in Cape Town. Am I able to automate a whole sequence on Stream Deck using ATEM 2ME for a Zoom pre-recorded broadcast? So if I'm not in studio, I can rerun the whole show.
Jason Bache is going to help you out here. Jason?
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but you have put me right into it depends. What do you mean by a sequence? By a sequence, do you mean is every single cut automatable with a Stream Deck? All the camera cuts from side to side, from beginning to end, pre-timed? I suppose you could if you can write it and explain it to a Stream Deck, it can be automated. If what I think you're talking about is, can you make a button for every single move that you could potentially make, train somebody to do those moves, and then not be in the studio? The answer is yes, but that's a bigger lift than I think you're thinking about.
Alec, hope that helped you. Let's move on to our next question. Oh, I'm sorry, Courtney, you got your hand in a little too late.
Yeah,
I think they've already triggered the pass.
Next question's coming from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Any suggestions for panelists on a Zoom meeting to record a local copy of their camera and mic as a backup to my local Zoom ISO recordings to avoid any bandwidth issues on their end?
Well, local recording is always possible, and there's a lot of tools we use to do this. First and foremost, I have usually 2 or 3 copies. If there's something really important that I'm doing and I want to make sure that I preserve not only, for example, the active camera view in Zoom, but my particular feed, I usually use a tool like Rogue Amoeba's Loopback, and I use I'm not Loopback for that. What am I thinking about? What I use to capture the Zoom off locally. The other one that wrote
Audio Hijack.
Audio Hijack. I'll capture an audio feed there that's discrete. If I'm looking to do the actual Zoom record in your Zoom meeting, if you're host or have co-host privileges, you can certainly just capture the meeting to your local hard drive or to your Zoom account. If you have a Zoom Pro account, you have a lot more flexibility in this area. But I'm going to let Jason Bache dive in on this as well.
So yes, you can use Zoom to do your recording, and the benefit of that is that it will, have some good sense of the timing of the rest of the meeting for the ISO record. That does not necessarily mean it's going to be the best recording, unless it's the only recording that you can do, in which case, let me think. What are the suggestions? There is a setting in Zoom that basically says optimize the local recording for third-party video editors, and that is in recording and then advanced, and it's the last one, at least in my version of Zoom, all the way down to the bottom. Generate recordings in a standard format compatible with third-party video editors. This may increase file size. What that means is that the video file is going to be set up in such a way that that it can be dragged into something afterwards.
You can also do a traditional screen scrape, which I used to do a lot, which is that if you have the meeting or your view of the meeting on a particular screen, you can just use something like QuickTime Pro. I used to do that back in the early days a lot, and literally just draw a recording window on top of that and start QuickTime recording and get a copy of what I'm doing that way. There's a number of possibilities for grabbing something, and hopefully, come back and let us know if you found one that works particularly in what you're looking for. Let's go ahead to the next question.
This one is coming in from Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas. Shot something important on an iPhone this week using Blackmagic Camera, writing ProRes to an external SSD. Well into a long take, I think the USB cable was bumped. Now the disk seems corrupt and Apple Disk Utility can't touch it. What's next?
Yeah, that can be a difficulty. Alexander Knight, you want to give him some help?
Well, I would suggest what you do is you go to grc.com and purchase a copy of the very inexpensive SpinRite software that Steve Gibson has made, which is, I haven't found a better recovery and maintenance tool out there. And you can see a screenshot. I'm just going to show you here. He's got a little video on the homepage that just shows you the interface, but it's good as a preventative maintenance tool, but it's also good at repairing, just doing general maintenance of recovering drives. And yes, it works on both spinning drives and SSDs, and version 6.1 now fully supports that. So that's what I would suggest, and see what SpinRite tells you.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, and it also depends. If the problem was a bumped USB cable or a loose USB cable, it could be that it just lost communication with the USB bus in the middle, which means that it didn't write anything after the cable was bumped. So, it may have corrupted the disk and also not written anything, any of those, the ProRes, may not have continued the ProRes file after the cable was bumped because the USB lost communications with the computer. So even if you do pay a lot of money and get the disk uncorrupted so it can be read, if you can read the disk, if you can see the file names, but it just stops at a certain point, that's probably an indication that it was bumped and didn't continue. If the disk can't be read at all, it might be there, but just if you can't read any of it, it could be just a corrupted allocation table or links, file links, which can be fixed with software out there. But I'd look into if you can examine the disk and see how much of it shows up as being used to try and determine if the file is even there.
Jason Beige.
Long story short, if it was never written, it can't be recovered. SpinRite is an excellent software solution, and this really comes down to what important means. You can always send it to drive savers, and if it is there to be gotten, it will be gotten.
Yeah, back in the early days of doing long-term recordings to QuickTime and things like that, I got woken up to the fact that video files typically have a start and then an end of file, and if there's no end of file that the computer can understand, it will not be recoverable easily. And I found that out when I completely ran my phone out of memory at the tail end of a long recording, and I lost the whole thing. It bummed me out. Alexander, you have some other thoughts?
Yeah, one last thing too, because if I was building a mobile rig like this with presumably and hopefully you have some kind of cage, maybe one of the small rig cages around that iPhone. I don't know what kind of cable you use, but I would use a right angle cable if you didn't do that the first time. So the next time you do this, I just find that the right angle cables are just a little bit more secure and they don't poke out as much as the standard straight USB cable. So just a little bit more security there.
Yeah. Next question.
This one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What do you think of using Resolve over a dedicated digital audio workstation?
Courtney Gooden?
Well, since Blackmagic bought Fairlight was a really comprehensive digital audio workstation. They've been in the business longer than almost anybody. So developing their software all the way through, and then Blackmagic bought them and incorporated most of Resolve, most of Fairlight's audio DAW into Resolve. So if you have that complete version, the studio version, you should have access to all those Fairlight tools for editing and all the tools for modifying, cutting out breaths, all the editing work you need. I think as long as the file isn't tied to a video file, I think you can still edit it quite comprehensively. Especially, I think that that article that you linked to mentions the person who used to edit radio commercials in Fairlight. So if you're used to doing that, it should be an easy move over to Resolve.
Alexander Knight?
Yeah, I mean, I use it to make minor edits for video stuff that I'm working on. But as someone who's used Pro Tools for 25 years, I can tell you that DaVinci Resolve's Fairlight audio editor is woefully inadequate and nowhere near as comprehensive. In fact, it's nowhere near as comprehensive as any other dedicated digital audio workstation, whether it's Logic Pro, Cubase, Reaper, Adobe Audition. It's about using the right tool for the right job. Is it a replacement for those tools? Absolutely not. Can you use it? Yes. But even in the post-production world, I'm almost certain that they don't really use it for any kind of comprehensive scrubbing of audio. That's just stuff is usually shipped out to people that are working in Pro Tools or maybe Nuendo or some other post-production tool like that is dedicated for that job, because there's a lot of stuff that Resolve is missing.
I'm not in the Dissolve workflow area, but I can tell you I've been really shocked. I was talking to some people who are in a position to know, and they said, well, you realize that the stuff you're doing in Final Cut, Apple's tool for video editing, all of the code that handles audio is the exact same code from Logic. They didn't rewrite anything, rewrite a whole new audio engine to stick into Final Cut when they were designing Final Cut. They looked over there and went, oh, we already own Logic. We've got not only all the code to handle audio, bring it in, deal with it, apply plugins to it, and all that stuff. It's already there. So let's just port that in. And so sure enough, I started testing things and I went, this is completely pristine. So at that point, I stopped using DAWs mostly, and I just used my NLE for all my audio recording. And I've now done multiple audiobooks, multiple hundreds of commercials and everything else, because I'm essentially using Logic. It's just in a different wrapper. Now, to Alexander's point, those wrappers can be important. What Tool A exposes to you from calls into core audio, which is how the Apple ecosystem manages its audio streaming and processing, that's going to be different product to product. So if you're doing a particular kind of work and somebody has designed an interface and called it this program C, and it exposes to you only what you like in a fashion and a design and in a user interface that you like, no, but use that. That's perfect and great. If you find that, like I did, there are aspects of what they did in their audio for video creation and Final Cut that really helped me do my audio work, particularly in the form of Final Cut. It's the keyword. There's just a whole bunch of keyword organizational tools in there that I find when I'm managing a complex, something like an audiobook where I have maybe 50, 60 characters I need to track, and I need to pull up at various times and work with just that character. Those tools really make my work a lot easier, but it wasn't designed for doing that. I've had to adapt a tool for something else to do that. And I'm going to suspect that it's like that across the world of all the different programs in audio. It depends on what tools are underlying, what's the technology underlying that ecosystem's audio handling. And I've noticed that, I keep coming across these tools that underneath the tool, it's the same technology being deployed. So you're not going to get a different result if it's the same audio engine under 3 different brands of things. You're just going to get different tools exposed to you because I think that's what their market prizes. And that's the way it should be, I guess. All right. Hope that helped you, Roscoe. Next question.
Next question is coming from Talalik Lopez Waterman in Phoenix, Arizona, USA. I heard you all talk about the indistinguishable, quote unquote, nature of AI video from real video in the pre-show. But don't you always know it's AI because of the audio making your ears hurt? Sounds like fingernails on chalkboard to me. That hasn't been my experience.
Courtney Gooden, weigh in on this.
I haven't noticed. Well, it depends on what you're talking about. AI video the AI slop. The ones that are AI generated audio and video, where it's just they've taken ChatGPT and ChatGPT has written the script, and then they pick an 11 Labs default voice, which usually sounds like Bill Davis, and chooses that. And
only the one called Bill.
Yeah, the one called Bill. And it always after about 5 minutes, you go, you can tell the pattern. It has a certain cadence to it, and it always mispronounces certain words. And, especially names, that everyone knows how to pronounce, and it pronounces them wrong. Okay, well, this is AI slop. And they're usually 30 minutes long, and they keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again. Now, there is AI-generated video where they take real audio recordings, which are quite good, and then generate the video to match the audio recordings. And those don't hurt my ears. But after a while, I get so tired of that stock announcer that everyone chooses to do their voiceover on their AI slop 30-minute video that's just generated for the clicks with some sensational thumbnail that says, "You won't believe what so-and-so said then." And then you play the 30-minute video and they never say anything. The thing that was advertised in the thumbnail is never there.
Yeah, I very much like Courtney. More and more, you can just tell that there are just click farms out there, and they're starting to get really sophisticated. I can't tell you the number of, during surfing, here's a little thing, and they give you this little snippet on screen that you read. It's like, I walked into the boardroom and couldn't believe what happened when the attorneys told me I was fired. And, if you're someone out there and you're between jobs and you're going, oh, okay, this might be something and so you click into this thing, and within the first minute and a half, those errors show you, okay, what's happened here is somebody used generative to write a script. They polished it up. So it's sometimes it's a really good script, but the execution of it through generative voices, you just start seeing these fall apart moments where you go, "What? That's weird. Why'd they pronounce that way?" Or you didn't pause before you said, "and he killed him." It was just like, I walked into the door and I killed him and I walked out. That's just a horrible interpretation of that line. Now, some people don't care, and I get it. And maybe you find this entertaining and you just want to spend the 12 minutes they're trying to keep you engaged so that their dwell time stats go high because they can monetize that somehow. But it all starts to seem very manipulative to me, and I do long to get back to what human beings can do when they're very good at what they do, because that's what we've been listening to since we were children. And you can tell the authenticity of a voice that is really engaged and passionate about a subject versus a machine that's just cranking out the parts of speech based on the scripting. So I don't know. Maybe we will flip over that uncanny valley someday, and you won't be able to tell the difference. I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to that or if I'm worried about that. But regardless, that's the world we live in now. Tlaloc, I share your concern. And I've gotten to the point now where the moment I know it's, as Courtney says, AI slop, I click away from it, because that's the only thing that's going to make any difference to the algorithm is if they put something up that's substandard and you stick with it, you've just told them you want more substandard because that's working for them. Costs them nothing to make, so they're gonna churn that stuff out forever. Crazy times we live in. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas is asking, what are the best gaffer tape deals on Amazon?
We've often said we do not talk religion on this show. You're very close to Gaffer's tape as a subject that is near and dear to our hearts. Jason Bache, dive in.
All right, so let me start up with the Sermon on the Mount here. Don't buy cheap Gaffer's tape. Don't buy cheap Gaffer's tape. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen this, Paul, but on Amazon, you can go to these deals. They're like right up here, and that's where you get the deals. But get good Gaffer's tape. Don't buy it just because it says it's got 12 rolls for $12. Boy, is that just a road to regret.
We should make up a 10 commandments of Gaffer's tape. Thou shalt not leave residue. There's a whole bunch of things we could put in there. Courtney Gooden, what do you think?
Yeah, best deal. You may not be having. It depends on what you want to use your Gaffer tape for and what quality that you need. And if you go on Amazon, there is so many suppliers of Gaffer tape. It just doesn't end. There's page after page after page after page of gaff tape of different prices. Everything from $19 a roll to $3 a roll. It's a lot. What I do is I go to a site like Quixote's Expendable Store. Now, this is a professional expendable store in Hollywood that professional gaffers use, and they're using this ProGaff brand tape. And so you can find that on Amazon for about $19 a roll, which is cheaper than the $25 that they charge at the Coyote Expendables store. But that'll be the way of finding your high quality Gaffer's tape and not getting trapped into buying something that is, Chinese has got like 4 fibers in it, every 2 inches, which you will find some Gaffer tape out there that, the cloth in the Gaffer's tape is like muslin and not like, a high quality cotton bag.
This is such an interesting subject. Alexander Knight, weigh in.
Yeah, some of the brands that were mentioned, like ProGaf is good. Also, Dabco. I mean, really anything that says it's any American company that makes their tape in the U.S., I find is pretty good quality. Just avoid all that cheaper or low grade stuff that is made in China. You'll really regret it. I also recently became aware of a brand from friend of the show, James Haldane, Lowry Sales in Canada, and you can get really good pricing if you buy these by the box in bulk, and they make their tape by hand in Canada. And I found that the quality, I bought a roll off of James, and it's really good quality tape. I don't know if they ship that to the United States, Paul, but you might want to check, because considering the exchange rate is favorable from American to Canadian dollars, you might be able to get a good deal on some Canadian-made tape. But I don't know if maple syrup is included with that orders. You might.
I was gonna ask.
And there, I think we could do literally a whole hour on Gaffer's tape. I've been using it long enough that, you get a roll of Gaffer, somebody hands you a roll of Gaffer tape, and you can tell immediately when you start to peel off that front end exactly what you're dealing with. But that's not the whole story. I'm sure people who've been around a long time, like I have come back to a set or something like that, and you see a piece of Gaffer's tape that was left on something for 8 months. And you're going, oh, I wonder how good this stuff was. What's going to happen when I peel it off? And, in your career, you've peeled it off and the backing comes completely off of the gunk, which is now dried and stuck on something, and you have to go find Goo Gone to get it off. And you'll find other tapes that, even though they were outside for 6 months, still come clean. You will have made that horrible error of taping down a cable across a floor and been in a real hurry. So instead of peeling the tape off the cable, some idiot just came through and pulled the cable with the tape on it, and the tape stuck to itself. And now you've got an afternoon out there, and God forbid you leave that on for a while in Arizona in the summer so that the gunk all emulsifies and gets all over the cable. And then you're down there with a tub of some horrible cancer-causing chemical trying to get your original 50-foot XLR cable clean again. That's why we get so passionate about this. As you deal with this stuff, you begin to see the difference. I hardly ever spend less than maybe $17 or $18 on a sale from a big house that just over-ordered it like that. And that between that and $25 for a roll that I need real quick, and this is all I can get on the shelf at some place that I know is okay. But boy, you get down at anything less than that, and it's probably going to be a big knockoff. And you just don't want to deal with that stuff. Life's too short. So buy good tape, whatever brand. I've gone through like 7 different brands over the course, but I usually buy it from a really serious outlet, somebody who deals with true gaffers and understands that bad tape messes up your whole life. So stay away from it. Thanks for the question, Paul. Let's go to our next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York is asking, flying to a conference for some on-the-spot testimonials and possible sit-down interview filming with an iPhone 17 Pro, iPad Pro 13-inch, a Manfrotto tripod, Blink 500 B2 Plus mics, a pair of key light minis and stands. What am I missing?
Oh, boy. The checklist that you created the first time and added to every time you've gone out on location since then. And eventually you will find yourself in possession of a document that is everything your system needs to do your jobs correctly. And it's not what anybody else said, it's what you thought. That's my overarching concern. But Courtney, dive in. You've got a lot of experience with this.
Well, if it's to be used professionally, if you're not just doing it for social media hits or something, I would take, at least a DSLR and a separate recorder of some sort, like a Zoom H4 or F6, something like that. And something where you have, you can monitor the audio if it's important recording interviews. You don't want to get back and see that, hey, the audio is corrupted, or the wireless mics kept taking hits, and without confidence of that you've got the interview recorded, it's tough. And doing it on your phone, sure, you can check it afterwards to make sure it's everything's there. Check everything at beginning, middle, end before you leave. Of course, that's not going to tell you if the audio dropped out in the middle if you're not monitoring the audio. So just be sure that using wireless mic, especially at 2.4 gigahertz, and especially if you're at a conference where there are hundreds of people with cell phones, 2.4 gigahertz audio wireless links can be problematic in a venue like that. I would go with a wired type microphone or a mic on a stand just out of the shot to do the interview with, as a backup, at least on a separate recorder. So at least if you get interruptions in the wireless transmission, you've got it. Or make sure, I'm not sure if those recorders, if you're doing it in the United States, those recorders record in the transmitters themselves. If you do have a wireless mic that records in the transmitter itself, do that to make sure that you have a backup of the audio, because an interview without the audio is pretty worthless.
Yeah, and I just realized I was thinking about something else before we dove into this. And the checklist reason that I came up on that first is that I have a variety of checklists, one of which is my flyaway system. And that's what I was thinking of when I mentioned that. If I have to go somewhere and do a real simple couple of iPhone interviews, I have a checklist just for that. And it's the product of going through a couple of those and realizing that I need to change what can I substitute out. Instead of bringing 12-inch panels, can I get by with smaller light panels, hopefully that are battery driven, but some kind of diffusion arrangement? I've got a couple of pop-up softboxes that are a little like window shades, and I can put those behind that and still get a soft light source. What are my smallest, lightest weight stands that I can travel with, so I know when I get there I can position my lights correctly? If I do have AC nearby, can I get a lightweight extension cord that'll give me 6 to 10 feet of reach that I can bring over and not have to worry about my batteries if it turns out that the interview that I thought was going to be an hour is 3.5 hours for circumstances beyond my control? I just think you really have to come up with solutions. And I find myself replacing things. Here's my larger set. Now, how can I downsize it? I'm going to keep all the larger set stuff, but if I have to go small and mobile, what are the things that I'm seeing develop out there? And I say develop out there because there's been so much, video is a much bigger game now, and people at all these different levels do it. And there's so much really good quality, small, portable, battery-powered gear now that if you start to substitute some of the big studio stuff with that for your travel packs, it can work really well. But everything Jason said, or everything Courtney said, I support. Next question.
From Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida, USA. Client wants a vintage look for interviews. Any suggestions and tips on using vintage lenses?
How vintage do we want to go, Jason Vaish?
All right, so let's start with the first part, because I need to be sure that you are not assuming that vintage lenses might be what you're thinking of when they say vintage look, and there's some meat behind that. But more importantly, I suggest you go back to the client and say, do you really mean vintage lenses? What does vintage mean? This is like saying a client wants distressed jeans. Well, okay, distressed jeans are normal jeans that have been messed up somehow, right? How do you want to distress the video? If you really do mean vintage, then be prepared to do a fair bit of focusing. And there is some truth to the fact that there are beautiful lenses that you can get from way back when sensors were less sensitive, that did incredible work. And don't assume that autofocus and zoom will behave the way that you expect them to behave on a modern lens.
Courtney?
Yeah, and it really depends, like Jason was saying, on what vintage, 1800s, 1900s, early 80s, 90s. What vintage are you looking for? You might want to use a lens that has a 12 leaf or a multi-leaf aperture in it and shoot it at a higher aperture rating. That'll give you a little bit different look. But it depends also on the number of elements in the lens. What specifically are they looking for in the vintage lens? Are they looking for vignetting? Are they looking for depth of focus? Like an older lens that is maybe a cheap camera, old camera that has a fixed focal lens that is in focus from like 2 feet to infinity so that there's no bokeh, that kind of stuff. So are they looking for more interlens reflections, that chromatic aberration? There's a lot of things you could call vintage, air quotes, and and it just depends on what effects you're looking for. And these days, there are, filters and plugins in almost all video editing software that can emulate almost any type of vintage look that you're looking for. So you might take a look at post-production treating that as well, using computational photography to change the look after the fact.
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, I suppose it really depends on the budget too, right? Because if you have a large budget, depends on how far do you really want to take this. So beyond just getting vintage lenses, I've seen people go as far as to get vintage, vintage lighting from the 60s. And, one time I went to Seattle, there was a lady that owned this place that was you could go and get your photo taken, and she has all this vintage clothing, and just like the whole studio is broken up into different sets that look like different things from like the 60s and 50s. And she has vintage like Hollywood lighting from that era. So it really depends on how far you want to go. You'd need a bigger budget, and I would definitely get everything in writing.
Yeah, and don't forget, vintage lenses often means vintage lens mounts, which means you're going to have to bring some adapters to get that old lens onto whatever you're shooting with if you're not doing both a camera and a lens combination for things. So, and there are eras and looks. I suggest maybe if they want a vintage look, ask them, was there a movie or some era? Are you looking for like 60s news coverage look, which is a very different thing than a period piece like a movie set in the 1800s. They're both like older looks, and but they're very different. Color palettes were different. That Kodachrome look versus Agfa film look are different. There's just a lot of variables here. Hopefully you find what you're looking for, Andy. Next question.
Next question is coming from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. The dictation app wisprflow is getting a lot of buzz lately. Has anyone experimented with it? What's been your experience?
I haven't. I wondered if anybody on the panel had time to look at this website. It's wisprflow, wisprflow.ai. So obviously it is at least marketing itself as an AI creation. Jason? Yeah, any thoughts?
Yes, I've played around with it a little bit. It's a very, very well tuned set on the phonemes, at least of English. I haven't played with any other language. I think the rationale behind the name is that if you can understand a whisper, then you take the intonations out of the voice, which is really because again, a computer doesn't know. This is hard to imagine, but a dictation machine doesn't know your voice from a power saw. Okay, it doesn't. It is completely unaware of that. And to that end, the level of the accuracy will directly correlate to the time and dedication of the person who's refining the engine to get the phonemes in the language that translates then into the text. And yeah, it does a pretty good job.
Courtney?
Yeah, this seems to me to be like just about every other voice to text AI driven, software that's out there. Just Google Translate or Google voice to text uses the surrounding context to choose the correct word so it doesn't make as many mistakes. by putting the wrong type of spelling for a word that it hears, where the homophones, where it's the same word, sounds the same, but it's spelled differently and used in different situations. And it says it provides polished writing, and does it change the text that it's hearing to correct grammar mistakes that you may make when speaking? That kind of question, that I wonder about, if it actually rewrites the stuff as it goes using AI to polish it up some. So like it just does text to speech and then it runs it through an AI, make this grammatically correct prompt afterwards. So I'm not sure if it's doing that and rewriting, or if it's just a pretty high quality text to speech algorithm.
Yeah, boy, this is going to be an interesting thing as more AI gets into creating more human-like voice experiences. And I'll tell you a very quick story, because it happened to me just 2 weeks ago and a little bit last week. We were recording part of the audiobook, and it was a scene where I was directing two actors, an actor and actress doing a he said, she said scene. And he delivered his line set up. He's very grumpy and he's trying to dismiss her, and she's in tears kind of. And we got to the fourth line in the scene and everything was going. So I had used all of the take 4 stuff because it was really crisp and it was really good. But one line didn't land right to my ear. So I went looking for another one of the takes. And in take 2, that line, the actor had just nailed it. So I pulled that off and I put it in thinking, okay, that's going to make it a little bit better. That should be fine. When I played it back 4 days later for the cast so they could hear what they had done, everybody went, wow, great delivery on that line. It spiked among the cast as a special moment. I'm wondering whether or not AI is going to get to the point where it can do that, or whether everything is going to just get averaged from the algorithms and it's okay. And the scene wouldn't have been bad without that. If he delivered that line any one of the other 3 ways, we would still have listened to the story. But for me, as somebody who is trying to create something that's better than just average, in that moment in the story, that line delivery that actor had done made the scene for me. And so that's what I've been thinking about when I'm dealing with AI voices and the rest of that. How do you put in an algorithm that makes that kind of magic happen? Or do we need to, or are we just not going to deal with it anymore? Who knows? Next question.
This one is coming in from Scott Hancock in Tokyo. Currently run 3x PTZ, 3x NDI to HDMI converters, 1x PTZ controller on isolated unmanaged switch with nothing else. Mostly works, but gets some camera fail briefly. Got any suggestions to use managed switch with IGMP Snooping Querier? Logical improvement?
Jason Bass, you want to decode all these jargon terms for us?
Sure. I'm going to read between the lines here. So what I'm hearing is, and keep in mind, what you're seeing is camera breakup. What you're assuming is that it's the switch, and you're probably right. It's probably the switch. It could also not be the switch. There are a lot of ways that anywhere in the pipeline things can get goofy. If you want to not mess at all around with a switch, then you're going to spend money on a switch. Get a Netgear AV switch, and it will work, and it will either correct your camera or it won't correct your camera. I'm not going to get into it because specifically it sounds like you've looked at it and you're aware what IGMP snooping is, what the keyword needs to do. So either spend money on it or prepare to fiddle around with a switch, no matter how you do it.
Next question.
Next question is coming from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Thinking of jumping ship from Premiere to Resolve, what do I do about the 5 years of content and .prproj files that I may need to revisit? What is an easy way to export and convert to Resolve in my remaining 8 months of Adobe subscription?
Scott, I feel your pain. I've heard from a lot of people who have faced the same thing. You're in one software and you have to convert to another for whatever the various reasons are. Courtney, you want to dive into this?
Now, I haven't tried this, and maybe Bill can tell me if this works or not. But if you have Premiere Pro, they say that you can export from Premiere Pro into Final Cut Pro XML file, FCP XML files, and then you can import that FCP XML project file into Resolve. So it's kind of a roundabout way, passing through Final Cut Pro's format to an XML that could get you back using Final Cut Pro as the interchange format between the two. I don't know if that works.
You can do that. I'm going to recommend not doing it, and here's why. This is my experience with it. These are different systems, and they were designed to do different things. And part of the reason I love Final Cut, and this is just me and what it's meant for me, is that there's so much attachment to individual clips into your magnetic timeline that report out other things. And if you bring in a clip from someplace else, can you get the string out, the original string out done automatically? You can. But to me, there's not much value in doing that. What I do instead is I bring in the finished version of the project done in any other NLE, if I'm bringing it into my Final Cut world, and I string that out at the top and make it small so it's in the corner of my thing. And then I literally overcut from the original footage. And when I'm overcutting it, I apply the metadata, I apply transitions in Final Cut, I apply all the things to make it a real program in the language my software fully understands and gives me access to all the capabilities of the software I'm in now. And this, if you're moving from Premiere to Avid or Avid to Resolve or whatever, I think there's value if you're a good editor in getting it into the native language of your NLE program. So to me, just an XML import to try to get ahead of the game, I guess it could work in other programs. I don't think it works particularly well in Final Cut because of all these extra capabilities that I just love, and that's what makes it fun for me. Jason?
Wow. Scott, you need to replay exactly what Bill just said, because what he described is the best possible way to do this, like full stop.
No, thank you. It's how I've come to think of it. I don't want to hobble myself by bringing in the language of another editing system into my system. What makes my system special for me is understanding I have all my tools. And that's what I've heard from Avid editors who bring something from another program. Oh, we have to do it Avid style because that's what we're comfortable with and our shop needs to do that. And vice versa. The people who love the facilities of Resolve want access to all those. And if it's coming in from Premiere into Resolve, it's not going to have all of those links and accesses. So that's how I see it. Next question.
This one is from the QR code. Jack Levinson in Seattle asks, can the panel suggest whether CBR or VBR is best for streaming? Is there any situation where one is better than the other?
No, constant bitrate encoding versus variable bitrate encoding. This is a good chat topic. Jason, dive in.
Sure. All right. There is no best. That's why there are both things. And one will perform well. So let's start with constant bit rate. Constant bit rate assigns the same number of bits to the same amount of space per second, per hour, per minute, what have you. Variable will assign more bits dynamically to a more audibly complex thing that needs to be encoded. So what that means is, at the end of the day, it may very well sound better, assuming you have an encoder that will do it well. If you can do a high level, I stress high level, constant bit rate, and your let's see, what was it? Streaming. If your streaming platform works well with a high level bit rate, and you are confident that your bandwidth will not mess with you, then constant is better. And if you have a potential for bandwidth constraint, and you have a good encoder that will variably and dynamically set your voice or whatever it is you're broadcasting up well for decoding, then variable is going to be better. So it depends.
All right, Courtney, I'm sorry. I must have muted the wrong way. Courtney.
Okay, yeah. Kind of what Jason was saying. At variable bit rate, adjust the amount of compression based on the complexity of the image. And so it can give you a more compact stream that'll take up less bandwidth. Constant bit rate kind of makes compromises on the really it chooses a mid-range for your bit rate. And then if you get a really complex frame, it may not do as good a compression on that because it's trying to fit it within that bit rate, and it's got to move on to the next frame. And so it may not have time to compress at the correct amount. And it also depends on whether or not you want to have certain features. I think certain features in I don't know about streaming, but in pre-recorded files, constant bit rate versus variable bit rate, it's a lot harder to find bookmarks, for example, because the bit rate varies. You can't just go to a bookmark based on the known bit rate times the number of bytes in the file to find that bookmark. And so it's got to get near, and then it's a lot more complex in maintaining edit points or cut points, or also for doing trick play. For you, if you want to back up half a second, if you've got that feature where you want to offer your person who's viewing it to be able to back up a second or back up a certain amount of time, that amount of time that you back up may not be easily done in the playback, and depending upon the software player that they're using to play it out, if it's a variable bit rate. Constant bit rate's a lot easier because you can just calculate a position within a file based on the constant bit rate and the length of the file at that point.
You muted, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. My version of that is something I used to teach in the classes a lot. If you have a shot like mine right now, nothing is changing in this except my head and my hand, and that's it. Everything else stayed the same. So this shot is pretty easy to compress. I mean, all it has to do between frames is just what's changed about me. You take that same camera and you take it outside and you put it against a tree in a wind, and every single pixel in the whole thing is changing constantly as the leaves all blow around and everything moves. One is easy compress, one is hard to compress. You apply the same compression to both of them, you're going to get a worse result technically on the tree than you will on the talking head. So they say variable bit rate, we're not going to use much of our bandwidth for processing for Bill, but we're going to use a lot for the tree to try to make it the best we can. So horses for courses, I think, is what you've heard from everybody, and I'm going to agree with that. Next question.
This question is coming from Job Caper in Hilversum. Starting a new podcast, what are the platforms I should look at to host and platform them?
Alexander Knight's going to help us. Alexander, dive in.
Yeah, there are many reputable platforms. I'll mention a few of them. So Buzzsprout is the one that I use that I really like. I just like their interface. I've used others as well. Libsyn is another one, and also there's Blueberry, and those are probably the top three that are IAB certified. So the certification is kind of important because it just makes sure that the analytics that they're providing you is going to comply and be accurate across the board. There are some there are some other hosting platforms that are not yet certified. So some of the download numbers, they may not be 100% accurate. So I would probably stick with one of those three. I settled on Buzzsprout, and I used to be on Libsyn, but I moved to Buzzsprout because I've just found that the interface was a lot slicker and easier to distribute across to multiple platforms. So that's the one that I like, but they're all pretty good now.
Thanks for the question, Job. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York is asking, upgraded fiber from 500 to 1 gig. I was getting a bit over 500 on speedtest before, but only 876 up and down with upgrade. Is this the limit of the service, or should I call my ISP and ask them to look into it? Using provider Calix GigaSpire and Gigapoint.
Jason Bache, dive in.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that sounds pretty obvious. If you expect a gigabit, then getting a gigabit will always require slightly more from your port, right? There's always overhead. A speed test is not a uniform thing. From where, under which circumstance? We test these things, and we like to pretend that bandwidth is this entirely set thing. Well, it's my speed. Well, no, it was your speed to wherever you connected to, and for however long as you went up and down for the amount of time that you were running the test. So my guess is that it has to do with your network infrastructure. If you want to make sure that it's not you, then you need an entire pipeline that is gigabit or better, meaning 1.5 or more likely 2.5, because I've never seen a gigabit and a half Ethernet. But my point is, it has to be more than the capacity of the port and of the entire thing, network, router, gateway, all the way down, or you're just never going to get there. And also, your provider could also be being cheap, but that's the way to make sure it's not you.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, it depends on whether you've got fiber it's the same fiber in both situations. So they're just changing the protocol on your gateway to open it up to 1 gigabit versus 500. I find that I have gigabit, and here where I'm very close to the gateway, I can get 915 up and down, or I get 938 up and 915 down. I get a faster up than I do down, but it depends on the server that I'm connected to sometimes, what that speed is going to be. And also, if you have a separate router other than using the router within the fiber gateway, that can slow you down a little bit. And even I have Ethernet out of my first router into a second router upstairs, so it's doing DCP upstairs again, so that slows it down. I can only get about 800 or 700 to 800 out of the upstairs router than I can out of the downstairs router, all hooked to the same gateway with gigabit fiber. So it depends on what's going on in your network after you connect to the gateway, and it depends on what the server is that you connect to and you can change that. And when you do the speed test, you can, depending on if you use the Ookla speed test, you can go in there and change the server that you're connected to and try some different servers and see if they give you more consistent, higher bit rates.
Yeah, we got a pretty robust discussion in the chat about this. JJ McKenna said packet overhead is always 15%. It's in the header. And there are a lot of people who are saying the process you're using for testing, whether you're using Cloudflare, or seems to be recommended in the chat a good little bit, or Ookla's speed test or something else, speedtest.net is mentioned. So there's a lot of variables going on here that people are talking about in the chat. Just know that. Next question.
Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas is asking, everybody's freaking out about AI, but the solution for the production industry seems to be authoritative, unique content. The downfall of easy video production has been lazy content creation. Is the pendulum swinging back to substance?
What an interesting question, Danny. Let's dive to Alexander Knight for his thoughts.
I would say that anybody who claims to know how this stuff is all going to play out can't be trusted, because this stuff is changing on a day-to-day basis. I do agree in general, though, that my observation, too, has been that because of a lot of the tools that are out there now that have made our jobs easier, it's very easy to just use a service that can take your long-form video content and clip it and make 60-second clips that you can post on TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. The editing, the quality of those services, and they're getting better all the time, but I find the quality of the editing to be not fantastic. Editing by having a human being edit those clips is still far better, but it takes a lot more work. So is it swinging back to substance? I'm not sure about that. I haven't really seen any evidence of that yet, just by all the stuff that I see. I mean, I can tell when the people are using Opus to make stuff. No offense to the people at Opus, but like I can tell when they're using that stuff, because it's not as good. And I spend a lot of time hand editing these videos that I have to put up on Instagram, and it takes me hours, and I can see the difference in the quality of the edits, in the quality of the content. It makes a difference.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, the problem is as we move to generative AI, where it's generating the images and not just doing the AI-based cutting of material that you've created and shot and scripted. The generative AI tends to be repetitive. It's amazing to look at, but that gets old after a few cuts and a few takes or 5 minutes of looking at amazing imagery. I think it's kind of the democratization. It's kind of like when digital cameras came about, and you were freed from the cost of film stock and processing, so that it democratized film production and video production. A lot more documentarians could produce their documentaries far cheaper. So it opened it up, and so you ended up with a lot less polished documentaries because people that weren't used to doing them before are now doing them because it opened it up to a lot cheaper methodology. And the same thing is happening now with AI. You can produce visual effects that, are comparable, at least when you're looking at them on a small screen, to those that ILM could turn out, with explosions and car crashes. And, you have a lot of good-looking stuff on the screen that would cost you millions of dollars to create that you can create in 30 seconds using AI for no money. So it tends to, jade the viewer now because there's so much of that stuff being turned out now. It's like when we transition to computer-generated imagery for doing visual effects. You got used to saying, oh, well, that's not 12,000 extras. They didn't have to build costumes for all those people and put them out in that field to be all those Spartans. It's just an algorithm that Weta wrote, and they just said, create 1,000 people fighting in this field, and they did it. So it kind of loses its awe and its excitement. So I think you become jaded to the AI, and I think the same thing is jaded to the CGI, and now we're becoming jaded to the AI CGI. So it's another step of disgust, and you still need a story, a good story, good acting, good dialogue to sell a dramatic film, and AI is not going to be able to create that for you at the moment.
Alex Lindsay is fond of saying it can be easy to create or easy to watch. It is very seldom both, and I find that to be kind of increasingly true. That's one of the reasons I'm taking this turn into multicast stuff, is because I know that the simple declaratory voice work is going to go away. I mean, if you're just reading something that doesn't have a lot of heart and soul, it's much, 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 much more efficient to just have an AI voice do it. No question about that. And if it's a car manual, who cares? But if you really want to engage an audience and try to reach their hearts as well as their language processing center, I think it's still going to be tough for a while to come. We'll see. Next question.
This one is coming in from Kenzo Castanini in Cape Town. How can I automate video playback using timecode to play videos simultaneously on separate monitors? I'm using VLC with Companion.
Jason Bache, your thoughts?
There's a way to do this with you turn on some various server components. This can also be done very, very easily with scripting on the back end of VLC, because believe it or not, it is inherently a text-based application. Honestly, if you want to do this reliably, buy an application like MIDI. It will do playback beautifully. It is flexible, it is repeatable, and it will not make you crazy. And VLC has had a few problems with 0 days just kind of sneaking their way into their source code. So if you're getting paid for this, buy MIDI.
Courtney, can you dive in kind of quickly?
I don't think I may be wrong, but I don't think VLC chases timecode. So if you feed it a timecode signal, it will not look for a timecode in that file and start playing back at that timecode, which is what you need for timecode synchronized playback. You can, if you have files that are synchronized on, time from beginning that is not embedded time code. It's different than SMPTE time code. In other words, it's elapsed time. It might be able to play back files, go 2 minutes into each file and start playing. You can script that kind of stuff. But I don't know if VLC has the ability to actually read the time code resolve it, and keep it in sync with another file coming from another playback version.
Next question.
Rajan Chandel in Los Angeles is asking, is there an AI that does audio descriptions of video? I would like a text export of the description.
Harshit Trivedi is going to help us out here. Harshit?
Hey, Raj. So what I would try is to use Gemini. Gemini should be able to do this for you. aistudio.google.com, even if you go through that, and ask it when you go live to do an audio description, grab whatever text it captions out, and you may be able to pull out that text for what you're looking for.
Hopefully that helped you. That's going to wrap things up for us today. Thank you so much for paying attention to the show. We appreciate it. Without you, we have no reason to be here, and we enjoy being here and continuing this discussion every single day at office hours. We've been doing it for 2,000 plus days straight without a miss, and we hope to continue doing it long into the future. To our constituencies, as I call them, first and foremost, you who are watching the show and also contributing our questions. That drives the entire show. So without you, we don't have a show. And we appreciate your questions, always intelligent, always helping everyone learn more about this very important virtual production world that we're constantly moving deeper and deeper into. So thank you. To the panelists who show up here every day and do an amazing job of answering our questions. I don't think we've completely missed on a few typically, but very seldom, which means that these people bring an extraordinary amount of practical real-world experience to the panel every day. And thank you, each and every one of you, for doing that. And finally, our unsung heroes in the back end of this production who manage bits and bytes, have meetings constantly about how do we do this better, what technologies are we missing, what can we learn about, what can we bring in, and have our backstage teams become familiar with so that we know more about the entire infrastructure production and putting shows on and using the back-end tools that we use, the various platforms out there on the internet so that we keep up our knowledge. Thank you to our amazing back-end teams. Couldn't do this without you. That takes me to the clock traversal. We traveled 51,000 miles. That's how far we would have had to go to get to the people with these answers today. 82,000 kilometers. That is 406 million office hours standard bananas for scale, one of which Jason Bache is pointing to right now on your screen. Thanks for watching. It's Thursday night. David Paskin's show is tonight. So if you're around at 6 p.m. and you want to dive back into where you link to this show, you can find The Rundown with David Paskin. Great show. See you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Hey, Bill, I got your Angry Leaves in Autumn ProRes shot. Right? There it is. Took me a second. Oh, and of course, this is right the part of the video when they're not flipping around, but like, you know, that vibrant orange, the
And
second that starts flipping.
You got a little tiny bit of sky pulling out from a couple of places where it could probably do a simple run length encode, but God,
there we go. Oh, yeah. Oh, there they go. Now they're upset. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. It was fun today. Great questions.
Hasta lumbago.
See ya.